Hello, everybody. Welcome to this interesting episode today. Today's episode is a little bit different because back in April 2026, I went to a monastery called St. Joseph's Abbey in Spencer, Massachusetts for my personal silent retreat. And I particularly picked that place because Thomas Keating, William Manninger, and Basil Pennington, these three Trappist monks and fathers at that monastery a while ago, they are associated with developing and teaching centering prayer. And I did not realize they were located right here in Massachusetts where I live. So I particularly wanted to go there, even though they are no longer with us. I wanted to just be at that place where they served and practice not only centering prayer, but just for me to spend a week in silence with the Lord. So I didn't have the proper equipment to record a podcast conversation. But my conversation with Father Manuel was so rich that before I left, I wanted to sit down with him and actually record with what I had, which I had my iPhone and my iPad with me. That's the only two devices I had with me. So I used what I had to capture our conversation. So it's more unpolished in some way, and it's just two people face to face having a conversation in person. So I hope you still get something out of it. So welcome again and enjoy our conversation.
I would like to begin with the first question.
Yeah, go ahead.
What is most broken or missing in the way Christians, especially pastors and leaders, are being formed today?
Certainly, a lot of stress is put on the academic side, which is important as well. But it doesn't always move into praxis. How is it used? Because there is so much emphasis on the word, which is good, but taking that word and making it reality somehow gets lost sometimes. And I think there needs to be more on the actual practice side, how that's dealt with. I remember seeing this video several years ago where it was a woman actually from a Protestant seminary who was being interviewed about a couple of projects they were trying at the seminary to see how the seminarians would take the gospel and use it and put it into practice, It was kind of interesting because they set up three different places and they told the students, to go through these things, and they kind of watched to see how they would respond. And one of them was kind of like a Good Samaritan setup, where there was somebody in need on the street. And so they were watching the seminarians go right by. And I think only one or two actually stopped.
Wow.
Because the others were worried about being late, for the class.
Yeah.
So they saw, but they went by. Only a couple actually stopped and, asked the man what his problem was. And what was in their mind? Their mind was being on time to get to the class, They noticed, but they didn't stop or they didn't do anything, So it was basically like a little parable, trying to put into practice. There's a lot of that goes on. We see, but yet we don't want to get involved sometimes. I think that's from everywhere. Obviously, not just on a Protestant side, but I think in many different places. People today don't want to get involved, even when they see people in need. Mm-hmm. And that's always been strange to me. But there's so many things out there that certainly I can understand. But to kind of go out of your way to go to take the extra mile, to do more than what is just asked, isn't very prevalent today. You have individuals who do that very well. For the average congregation, I don't think so. I think they really need to be brought to a different level, more than just going to church for 1 hour a week or whatever, and then forget it for the rest of the week, which happens everywhere. But having some kind of spiritual formation underneath all of that helps to put it in reality? Well, for two reasons. One, for the individual, it becomes real for them, and not just a cerebral experience. How do I really take the gospel and put it into practice? Also for the congregation as well, where they're just not being passive, kind of absorbing, but we have several little endings for the Mass that we say before we leave. One of them is about proclaiming the gospel with your life, which I've always found interesting.
Yeah.
But take what you've received, bring it out. It's not an easy way, to find, but I think it is possible, and I think probably more people today are aware of that, but haven't been challenged enough to understand the importance
of going out there and living it out.
Exactly. Yeah.
What does monastic life understand about formation that the postmodern churches often forget?
I think probably the most important thing for our way of life is that it's countercultural, and we don't really embrace, the value system of the culture, in all its forms. I mean, it's not rejected, but in all its forms. No, as I mentioned that quote from Michael Casey yesterday, he says, if you're really serious about the spiritual life, this is what you want, then you have to start to let go of all the superficial stuff, that we deal with in our life. So here it is very different because things like renunciation are very, important for the monastic life. We even have a saying called separation from the world. And it doesn't mean physical. It means your attitude, your values, your behaviors, all these things are different from what the world, the culture, sees as good or important or what everybody should have. That's one of the reasons that we are kind of physically away here. We have our own little fortress, you might say, because if you really are, giving your life to God in this contemplative way of life, you can't have both. You can't have both. For example, we don't watch television. We don't take vacations. We don't go out to eat. I mean, things everybody does, right? Because we realize you can't have both. Because the emphasis here is really on prayer and reading, on Lectio Divina. And you can't, in your mind, turn one on, turn the other off. It's impossible. You have to have your vision all in the same place. Basically, it's all focused on Christ. That's why we're here, as well as, for our own growth in self-knowledge, which we feel, the more we learn that, the more closer we go to Christ, we come to Christ. So it's a different way of life that I think most people don't understand. Some don't even see the need for it.
Yeah.
Because to them it's kind of like we're running away from the world, and I usually say, no, it's the opposite. We're running to. We're not running away, and in fact, we're usually more aware of what's going on than people who are not here. Because a lot of that is brought to us by people asking for prayer.
Yeah.
An awful lot. I mean, every day we get prayer requests.
Yes.
And some of it is sad and very, even very desperate. But they realize somebody is praying somewhere.
Yeah.
And these monks are here, and that's their job.
Yeah.
Which is fine, which is good. That's what we are here for.
Yeah.
So it is a different way of looking at the world, different way of living, and a value system which is totally different.
I definitely understand when you say the fathers and monks here are more aware. I believe it because of my own practice of entering into contemplative practices. what is spiritual direction able to offer that sermons, Bible studies, small groups, or leadership training often cannot?
Well, first of all, it's one-on-one with another person. It's the individual, whereas, listening to worship services and all, are good, but the personal is missing. The spiritual direction is a much more intimate encounter, I find, where the person has made a choice and that they're trusting enough to open their soul, to another person with the hope of drawing closer to God and living a better life, living a more spiritual life, closer to Christ. So definitely the one-on-one relationship is very valuable, I find, and it very much relates to the early Desert Father, because there was always an elder and then a younger person,
yes,
and they would go to him or her and say, give me a word.
Mm-hmm.
What should I know? What should I talk about? And which is tremendous wisdom there, which isn't as simplistic as people think, because sometimes the older monk will give them something that they don't want to hear. So it's like, no, tell me something else. It's like, but this is what you need.
Mm-hmm.
This is what you need, whether are you ready to accept it or not. Spiritual direction like that is you're basically mirroring back to the individual. You're not really telling them what to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's different. One of the problems today is that some people think it's therapy.
Right. Yes.
And it isn't.
It's not. Yes.
It's not therapy. I usually tell people, if that's what you need, then you should do it, but this isn't it. And it's not just counseling, which is something else.
Yes.
And that's guidance. The spiritual direction is really the desire and the willingness to be transparent to another person, and that's a trusting relationship. It's not always easy sometimes, but when you have two people that really trust, and so that the directee feels welcome to really expose themselves in a way that they feel they can't do it in other situations. So that it's very personal, and it needs to be respected. That's for sure.
Yeah, because earlier we were talking about what was missing was that people are not going out to practice the gospel.
Right.
So in some ways, the next question fits as a follow-up question. How do we form people for action and justice without producing exhausted workers disconnected from God?
I think first you need to see what's possible, with the resources that you have, whether people or money or whatever. What are the resources? How much can we do with what we have? With the resources that we have. What would be possible for us, knowing around you what the needs are? Sometimes it could mean just helping another group that's already doing something, giving them help. That's one way. To like set up your own kind of situation. Ministry would be hard, especially in a smaller group. But knowing, I think, first of all, what the needs are, first by, I think, talking to people who do have programs, that take care of the needs of different people, especially urban, especially the urban poor.
Maybe I can refine the question a little bit, because I come from church planting world.
Right.
Folks who come out of the older church to start something new,
right,
they're very motivated.
Right.
So the folks that I worked with they're ready to do something, and so they want to go out and do something. So they're waiting for us to tell them what to do.
Okay.
So when we pitch an idea, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to bless the streets, and they go out there. After a while, I think people burn out, kind of trying to figure out what's missing in their activism that they are burning out. But then so now, after many experiences like that, today they're just like, I don't want to do it because it wasn't good for me.
Right.
mentally, emotionally, physically, it was just, I'm spent.
Right.
I don't have anything to give. So they're reluctant to now move. So there's a couple of those things. There are obviously people who need to go out and practice.
Right.
But there are people who have practiced and completely exhausted. So I guess that's the question I'm trying to get at. What can we do better? Do you see anything that's missing in that work?
I think the first thing would be, to look at it realistically. People usually get burnt out because they feel that, they're almost like taking the burden by themselves, and don't feel helped or supported. Or they're trying to do more than they can possibly do, and that will certainly exhaust you. And perhaps there isn't any time boundary to it. In other words, is this something we can do for 6 weeks? Is this something we can do for 6 months? What's possible with the number of people, with the resources, and how much time are we going to invest in this? I know with a lot of situations like this, people will at first be very anxious, to get involved and to do, but then they realize it's a commitment, and they have other commitments.
Yeah, right.
Their families, their job, they have other commitments. So then they feel kind of guilty if they let this one go. So what can they do in a realistic way that won't make an imbalance in their life? So, perhaps it has to be more occasional than, a regular thing. I know that to do something on a really full-time basis, because I've talked to people who run shelters and food centers and all that, in fact, I have a friend in Worcester who's been doing it for 50 years, and he said more than once he burned out.
Yeah.
More than once. And at one point he had to drop out because he was trying to do it all by himself. He got caught in that. But now is at the point where he lets the other people do it. That's a tough thing to do because you have to let go.
Yeah.
So whether it's a part-time or full-time, I think you have to know what your capabilities are and be able to balance without feeling guilt, at the end, and then walking away, and nothing really gets accomplished.
So people are busy, but I think people are wanting still what monastic life and what they have. And whether they know it consciously or not, I think they're craving for something deeper.
They are.
So how can desert or monastic spirituality be faithfully integrated into our urban, busy, ordinary life?
Right. It's a commitment. I think, first of all, they have to begin to appreciate values that the culture doesn't. For example, silence. Silence is next to impossible for many, many people. And I'm always amazed at people who come here find silence difficult.
Yeah.
They find silence very difficult because they're not used to it.
Yeah.
So whenever we have that, we try to fill it. I remember this one retreatant a couple of years ago. She was actually from Maine, I think, a younger woman, and she said, and she's single, as soon as I get home from work, at the end of the day, I turn on the television.
Yeah.
And then she said, I don't watch it, but I hear voices.
I see.
And then I don't feel lonely. So that says something to me. It's that the need for that is so great, and I think has a lot to do with her loneliness. But when people are alone and quiet and silent, then it kind of brings up all the things from inside that we normally don't think about or don't consider, that have to do with ourselves and our relationship with God. So for many people, it's a little threatening, believe it or not, to have silence, to just to be quiet, because there's no way you can enter into any kind of a contemplative experience or contemplative prayer with everything else that's going, around you. You have to make a decision for such and such a time or period or whatever, I'm not going to get involved in social media. I'm not going to watch television. I'm going to get off the phone. I'm going to, I mean, because all of those things I think are making it worse for many people today because there's too much information or saturated. And there's no way you can have a contemplative life, even a simple one, while still trying to do all these other things. It just won't happen. It just won't happen. And that's pretty much what the monastery is about, in the sense that, we deliberately pull ourselves away from things, although today it's very hard because you can't work without it, I mean, you have to have a phone, you have to have a computer, but sometimes I find it really intrusive because you feel obliged to participate in this that isn't, it's not going to help.
Yeah.
That's for sure. So I think it's harder today than maybe it was 100 years ago. Yeah. But in order to begin, even to just begin to, live some kind of a contemplative life, silence is where we start. Absolutely.
Kind of shifting the focus to pastors and leaders for them to sustain their formation and their ministry, because a lot of them do burn out. And so many of my friends, my colleagues, from looking back to my seminary friends who we all committed to becoming a full-time pastor, there more than 70% of my friends are not in ministry today.
Oh.
So I am concerned about sustainability. I heard about letting go, learning to let go, learning to embrace silence and being with the Lord. There are a lot of things that we can do, but is there anything else that comes to mind in terms of for our leaders and pastors and who are serving the congregants? What do they need to have that they are often forgetting in order to sustain their ministry and their formation?
Yeah, I think probably a lot really spend themselves, on the congregation, which is good. They give all their energy and all that they have, but are they taking care of themselves? That's often no. I see that here. We get a lot of visiting priests who come on retreat, and many of them burn out very quickly too, because they're not taking care of themselves, either physically or mentally or spiritually, or even simple things like they don't take a day off because they feel they're needed. The parish needs me, and I can't go away. But for your own psychological health, you need to have time for yourself. It's very important because you're always being needed for something. And probably the thing that where most people fail is the spiritual health. They don't really take care of themselves the way they should, spiritually. So, their own private prayer practices leave, disappear. They're not spending much time quiet or solitude. They're not reading spiritual books, they're doing Lectio Divina. Their reading of scripture becomes kind of superficial, only to take care of homily, sermons. All those things, they kind of come together, and you can't give what you don't have. It has to come from here, and in order to do that, you have to care for yourself, and it's such an important thing. And that's one reason, or one place where spiritual direction comes in, because the director should challenge the individual in a good way. You really need to spend more time with the gospel, spend more time, reading spiritual books. All these things are food, they're fuel for us. Otherwise, it becomes more empty than anything. So at least that's my own personal experience.
Thank you.
Yeah.
St. Paul talked about churches having 5 offices, like apostolic, prophetic, evangelistic, person who's shepherding and teaching. I kind of understand that to be external service, like people we're serving the church, and this is how you can serve.
Right.
I feel like spiritual directors have a unique, it's not mentioned there, but I feel like we have a unique way of drawing their attention back inward to God. While 5 offices focus on serving outwardly,
Right.
We have a different kind of voice. What should we, spiritual directors, emphasize if you want to bless the church with contemplative practices, monastic desert wisdom? What should be our responsibility? What should we focus?
I think first it needs to be presented to them, in a positive light, that this is an aspect of our life we haven't really looked at, or spent any time with, or even thought that it was necessary. Somehow kind of gradually, exposing people to this, in an educational way or experiential, like the contemplative prayer group. It's one way, to get people together to talk about it, especially. What do they find missing in their own life? Do they feel that they have everything they need, or is there a dimension to their life that they don't? They just don't have. I think a lot of it, of course, depends on the person's relationship with God. Is it purely cerebral, or is it something from the heart, which is a little different, more affective way of looking at it. But I think, first of all, the people have to know what it is. And one of the reasons the whole contemplative prayer practice got started was because in the late 1960s and early 70s, many Christians were going to Eastern religions because they offered meditation, silence, things that we weren't offering. But yet people saw that as like, I need this. But like Thomas Keating and Pennington, they basically wanted to say, we have this already. You don't need to go to India. You don't need to go to some other place to learn this. It's here. It's in our tradition. It always has been, but it hasn't been emphasized enough. And so we have what we need already, but finding out is such an important part of it.
I think that's why I appreciate what came out of Vatican II. Pope was encouraging, recognizing that, people are going to Buddhism and Hinduism because they seem like they know what they're doing in terms of meditation. And so I'm really grateful. I mean, again, the reason why I'm here is because of Thomas Keating and Pennington and Manager. And it's interesting to see how now when I talk about contemplative practices and silence and meditation, it's still today they immediately think, oh, isn't that Buddhism or Hinduism? With our Christian brothers and sisters, it takes a little bit of extra work for me to explain to them, this is our tradition. It's not something that we took in because they think, oh, are you getting into New Age? So that is always a challenge.
However, there is a huge difference in the Eastern practice of meditation and from Christian. They basically do everything they can to empty themselves totally. I don't know how that's possible, but at least in our tradition, it isn't so much the emptying; it's the receiving. To kind of find a way to break through the noise, the inner noise, so that we can receive the Holy Spirit. And it's kind of the opposite. It's like we want to be filled, not emptied.
So my last question, what dangers should we avoid as we try to build this healthier kind of formation movement?
I think first, who's ready for it? How many people are really interested, or how many understand what it is that you're trying to do? And I think that's an educational issue that probably needs to be done. either, it could be done through sermons, it could be done through, small faith sharing groups, but they have to know first, because you don't want to threaten them. And even just knowing what's out there, what's possible, because most people don't know. I mean, that's even in our own tradition. Most people don't know. I always get a kick out of the fact that, most Catholics don't know church history very well. They know all the bad things, but they really don't know. Like, for example, you talk about the Desert Fathers, people will look at you like, who are they? Yeah. And yet they need to know, what has been going on for the last 2,000 years.
Yes.
And most people don't have that kind of awareness. But I think the most important part is it's something that has to be gentle. You know what I mean? It's just, in a sense, in small amounts, for if you have people that know absolutely nothing, you want to threaten them with something new, but it's basically to help them to understand that there's something here that would really be helpful for your spiritual life, that would give you more, that would make you more open to the Holy Spirit working in your life. So it's available, it's possible. Let's look at this and see, and the different traditions have different things. The Orthodox Christians have their own. Theirs is much more mysticism. They put a lot of emphasis on mystery, and it's very attractive, I think, because now that's something, in the Roman side we have it, but not as much as the influence of the Eastern Church. And then all of the mainline churches have their own kind of spirituality too. The Lutherans, the Methodists, the Episcopalians, they all come from a particular tradition. And I find today that there's a lot more interest in things like Quakerism and the Shakers and Anabaptist groups, these smaller spin-offs, that emphasize much more interiority and silence, rather than a lot of words, which is fascinating. People are looking in different directions, but exposure is probably the place to start. But I don't know if that helps or not.
That helps.
Yeah.
Just something just came up. May I ask one more question?
Yeah, sure.
I just remember something.
Yeah.
This is a debate or discussion I was having with my mentor, Bruce Jackson. So we train spiritual directors. And, there was a question related to the question of people need to go out and practice living out gospel more.
Right.
And my mentor, Bruce was saying, in our curriculum, we need to send them out to sit with the poor and be in the margins and listen and serve. And that should be part of the curriculum. Because I came from that kind of world where we sent them out and I saw the burnt down. So my argument was, does that really accomplish inward journey? Does that make us go inward? Because what I saw, it didn't work. So my temptation is I want to see, does contemplative spirituality going inward truly produce outward journey? So our inward journey to God, being reminded that we are beloved children of God, does that truly produce natural outward motion that we can live a contemplative activist life? So that's kind of what I want to see. So I said, maybe we shouldn't teach that. Let's just focus on inward journey and let's see if naturally comes out. But my mentor was saying, but that's also part of the journey. Sometimes outward journey can help you understand inward journey.
Right.
What would you say to me? Because I'm not sure we should make them go out.
Right.
So that just came to my mind. So that's my final question.
Yes. It's certainly not, the active side should certainly not be the first steps taken. I think the individual needs a lot more inner work first, and a lot more self-knowledge before going out, because then it just becomes external. We're doing a good thing. We're doing a good thing. We're helping the poor. We're feeding, which is all good. But if it doesn't come from that inner place, then it's different. On the other side, I think a lot of people don't really experience the inner journey for themselves when they've never experienced the poor. When they've never experienced people, that are desperate. People have nothing to eat, no good place to live. They're living under bridges and things like that. If you've never experienced that changes people. I've seen, people, it's like their horizon is suddenly opened and they realize that this is probably the majority of humanity, that are suffering in one way or another. And it kind of brings you back to yourself, where you can look at yourself and where have I been?
Yeah.
Usually just here. So I think you need both, but depending on the individual and their experience and, their own background, if they really don't have much experience, in a ministerial way, then I think first they need to do the inner work first, and then when they have that, then I think you can take that and bring it, because you will see things differently, because anybody can do a good deed, but where's it coming from? So you need both. That's the short answer.
Okay. Thank you, Father Emmanuel.
Okay, you're welcome.
It's been thank you so much for taking your time I know you have a lot going on today. But thank you for taking time to sit with me again.
Sure.
I just really appreciate your wisdom. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Good.